welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining this is our third Women in Bat Science, Indaba. Our first one started in 2023, and this is in part of the celebration of International Women and Girls in Bat Science. I'm really excited to have the GBatNet leadership team joining us today. This is our fantastic lineup of speakers today. So Professor Tigger Kingston, who is also a founder for CBCREW, which is the Southeast Asian Bat Research Network. And Tigger is also the co-chair of the IUCN Bat Specialist Group and heads up the Kingston Lab at Texas Tech University. We're also joined by Dr. Susan Sang, who is a research associate at the American Museum of Natural History, and also a CEO of a consultancy looking at human-wildlife issues, particularly on trafficking, sustainability, but also doing some capacity strengthening work there. And Susan is also on the steering group for CBCREW, as well as a regional chair for BAT 1K, and also a member of the IUCN Bat Specialist Group. Next, we have Dr. Nancy Simmons, who is the curator of mammals at the American Natural History Museum based in New York. Nancy is also a member of the IUCN Bat Specialist Group, and also the part of CBCREW and the BAT 1K project as well, and she's also one of the board members for Bat Conservation International. And then we have Liliana, who is a professor of conservation biology based at Stony Brook University. And Liliana is also on the she's one of the board members for the Bat 1K project and is a scientific advisor for BCI. And then we have Abby, who is a PhD research student, but also a GBatNet representative for the student representative, who will be talking to us today and giving us a perspective about early careers. So I'm just going to stop there and hand over to Tigger, who's going to give us an introduction to GBatNet work.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And it's really exciting to see everybody signing in and saying who they all are, and then from all these different corners of the world. And all the vast majority that I've seen sign in so far have been women, so that's also very exciting to see how many women are out there studying bats. And when we come to talking about GBatNet, you'll notice, obviously, that the leadership is entirely women. And this isn't really... this wasn't purposeful in the sense that as we were building this, we're like, aha, we must find a woman to join our women's leadership team. It was really a product of many decades of people like Nancy growing the field and paving the way for bat scientists, female bat scientists, and then everybody having complementary expertise, but just the fact that there are so many women now working in bat science. And so it's really exciting that this is where we're at now, but we will today talk about some of the pathways that we got here. And in developing GBatNet and GBatNet activities, we have been very purposeful to try and broaden who joins us and who engages in activities. So it's been very much a case of broadening participation and making this endeavor accessible to as many people as possible, and by doing so we've been capturing a lot of fantastic female scientists, women in science. So I know a number of people have seen this talk before, so I'm going to try and keep it fairly succinct after that initial rambling. So what is GBatNet? It's the Global Union of Bat Diversity Networks, and it's intended to be a network of networks. And we came together with this idea quite a long time ago now, like in 2011 was when I first presented on the idea, and then we had a book chapter with all the leaders from the existing networks of the time. that was published in 2016. And these are where those networks were at the time. So we had them distributed around much of the world, but with some gaps that have happily largely been filled now. So it was clear that everybody was out there doing their own thing at a regional level. But we were pondering in that book chapter whether it would be constructive to bring the networks together, right, into a meta network. We didn't want to impact anybody's the activities of any individual network, or annex or assault anybody's sovereignty about what they were getting up to, but we did see that there could be more than the sum of the parts by joining together. And a lot of this comes from the fact that many networks have come together already, these regional networks, because they have things in common. So this is CB Crew's kind of rationale, in that we have shared threats across Southeast Asia, such as land use change. We have hunting across Southeast Asia. We have many of the same species across Southeast Asia, so shared taxa, and then even shared individuals, with animals moving across borders. And as movement ecology and technology has improved, we're seeing how common this is, that bats don't just stick, even as individuals, don't just stick to one location, one country. And there's a real rationale at these regional levels to share knowledge and expertise and coordinate and prioritize efforts. So that had been, in reflecting on what had driven the development of the regional networks, that was really what was emerging. And that I've walked you through CB Crew, but this was true of many of the other regional networks as well. And that by sharing expertise and coordinating, it was a way to accelerate that research and conservation and coordinate and prioritize efforts. So you can see that that can work well at a regional level, but why do we then need to develop a global community, a global network of networks? And the rationales are really very similar, in that we have some whole regions that are sharing threats. So hunting isn't just in Southeast Asia. We see a lot of bat hunting in Africa, for example. We're seeing a very rapid spread of wind turbine installations. This has been going on for decades in North America and Europe, but we're now, of course, seeing this moving into the tropics. And there's expertise that can be shared across the world to try and mitigate the impacts of this as it spreads out. We need a diversity of experts to respond to new threats, things that we hadn't really anticipated, say, even 10 or 20 years ago. For example, such as the impact of extreme heat events, that is, have consequences for some of the larger colonial roosting bats that are in the open, like the flying foxes, and the impacts of fire, which have been catastrophic across continents in the last 5-10 years. It's also advisable, or has potential to impact the scene at a higher policy level, if we can talk with a unified voice. So at the time we wrote the chapter, we had little did we know that COVID was coming up, and that it would be very important to address this as a global community. So those kind of rationales really were what underpinned moving forward with GBatNet. And then there's reality. How did we get here? So after those very early thinking days, we then all met as a community at the IBRC in Durban in 2016. So appropriate that we're now being hosted by Bats Without Borders. And we went through a series of trying to get money from the National Science Foundation. Fail. Met again at the IBRC, tried again to get funding from the National Science Foundation, and was successful. But didn't really start up with major activities until 2021, after COVID. So that's kind of a little bit of the history, but what actually is GBatNet now, and what have we been doing since 2021? So as indicated, GBatNet is a network of networks, and we have a shared vision. So all the networks have their own priorities, of course, but we all share the vision for sustainable bat diversity in a changing world. And several of these networks are the original regional networks, and others are now, we've been joined by those that are more thematic, like Bat 1K, and the phenomics network. So networks that have are globally distributed but focus on a particular theme inside bat research and conservation. So if our vision is for sustainable bat diversity in a changing world, our mission is to bring together all these bat research and conservation networks from across these diverse disciplines and geographies. And this is very exciting, right? So with all the expertise we hold, we can go from the fossil records to the genome to the virome. We can work in deserts and rainforests and urban environments, from ecology to morphology. So we can bring all this expertise together and integrate it and work to try and understand one of the questions that got many us into bat research and conservation, certainly got me super excited, which is, why are there so many species of bats? So we have the big, long, sciencey way of saying that from the National Science Foundation, which is capturing the rules of life governing diversification of bat phenotypes worldwide across scales, but internally, and when typically we just say, why are there so many species of bats? And then the critical point is how can the knowledge about diversification processes inform efforts to secure sustainable bat populations? So how are we going to save them? Now, these are two massive questions. And so this isn't something that we ever intended to just be something that we did. Of course, it's a network of networks. So central to the GBatNet mission has been to develop research capacity of the next generation. We need to be able to pass this on and keep this mission moving. So we've had two cohorts of early career scientists, mostly students at this stage still, graduate students. This was our first cohort, and this is the second cohort that joined them early last year. So if our vision is a sustainable bat diversity in a changing world, our mission to integrate and articulate diverse bat research and conservation networks, and to understand this diversification, sustain bat populations and empower the next generation. How are we actually doing that? Well, one of the first things we did was bring all the network leaders together to join us in efforts to develop strategic directions. So that could then guide what we actually do, our priority actions, and how we're going to do them. So this was our network leaders meeting in May 2023. And this is the famous icebreaker that involves tying everybody in knots, but we had leaders from all the networks around the world. So there's about 18 networks represented by 2 people per network where possible. And together they came up through an iterative process that took us, that was the launch, the foundation point for. And where we've ended up, as you can see, the #1 strategic direction is to build and strengthen capacity for bat research worldwide, with particular emphasis on bat diversity hotspots. So meetings like today and hearing what everybody's been doing, and this push for more people and more women in bat science is central to that ambition, that strategic direction. We also need to address that one voice idea and have GBatNet respected as a global trusted body. As we move forward with research and conservation, we want this to be evidence-based and be able to actually inform the policy under the previous strategic direction. And then we focus in on 2 other on human dimensions, One Health, and then trying to facilitate advances in genetic and genomic research through cross-network collaborations. So there's a little, obviously there's a thingy there to get you to that if you can capture it. And then within each of these strategic directions, there are priority actions. For example, training. This is one of the things that really emerged for the capacity building, or is this continued need for taxonomic expertise worldwide. And so within that priority action, the proposed tactics are to train more individuals and make taxonomic tools available. So that's kind of how they're structured if you do go into the strategic directions. So, but let's back up to our how did we work with the community to address our core questions? Why are there so many species of bats, and how are we going to save them? And those were the questions that we just posed to the community through a series of as inclusive as possible meetings. And we began during COVID with soliciting people's ideas in the Big Bat brainstorm. So that was seven. We had 3-hour online meetings, and we did that 7 times. So we ended up with a fabulous collection of incoming with 120 ideas that people had prepared. And then during those meetings, we worked together to make these ideas integrative. So ideas came together that were integrative concepts. So again, very community driven. Of those 34 concepts, we then brought them to a face-to-face meeting before the 2022 IBRC and had locked everybody in a room and had them go through a series of activities to whittle down these concepts to 15 priorities that were then shared at the IBRC meeting itself, and recruited people to join the working groups. So those working groups are working. But one of the things I really want to comment on here about how you broaden participation and inclusion, there were a couple of tools we used doing this. For example, with the original individual ideas that formed those 120 going in, we pre-prepared a template so that people could fill in their perspective, and that can be very handy for giving a voice to people who get shouted down in group events or are a little shy. If you have something prepared ahead of time to engage people and let them, it also enables people to reflect on the question that you're posing. It enables people whose English might not be their first language, gives them time to reflect and write it down. And it means that the quieter voices don't get lost in the shuffle. So that was one of the things we did very purposefully at the beginning, to hear from people. We also worked, when we were meeting face to face, to always have individual based voting systems, the little stickers at the bottom that are stuck on a down here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. We had ideas emerging from collective discussion, but then again, individual opinion could be captured through voting systems, through the stickies in there, the little sticky dots in this case. So some of these things are really important, because often in research settings, women's voices may be quieter, or people may feel marginalized for other reasons. And so finding mechanisms when you're running collaborative, integrative work to enable people to feel comfortable. We were also very purposeful in those meetings to address the fact that people process ideas and think differently. So we had some great guidance from Fred Frick about internal processes and external processes. So this is the concept that some people like to talk their way through a problem. And those people then tend to congregate and talk, and other people like to sit and think and internally process what's going on. But if you let the outcomes of the activity just be led by the external processes, you'll always lose all this wonderful thought that people are being quiet about. So we were quite purposeful in making sure we would reach out to the internal processes, because you realize who they are fairly quickly, and then make sure we heard from them. So a couple of things in developing community research where purposeful action can ensure broad participation, which of course then captures women's opinions and knowledge. So we ended up with 15 working groups. I won't walk through all of these, but what they've been doing is having regular meetings with 1-year goals and 3-year timeframe goals, most of which involved literature reviews for the first year, or getting to know each other, or coming up with various ways of getting a landscape perspective or of the field that they were looking at. And this was another area where we worked quite to support particularly early career researchers. Susan can update me in a little bit, but at least half of these are led by early career researchers, if not more. So this is a great opportunity to lead an initiative that has, and we that has a product that can be important for an early career researcher's career, with all these publication outputs. So again, we emphasize to people engaging in this that there's a cost benefit analysis that they have to do about engaging in something outside of one's main research. And so if you're trying to get early career researchers to engage in something, there has to be something for them professionally, such as a publication that they're the lead on, the experience of marshalling everybody, a really cool integrative idea that can then be the foundation for publications, or sorry, foundation for proposals moving forward, as well as the opportunities presented through networking. So again, being purposeful and encouraging people to think about what do they want out of this if they're going to lead this or participate in it. And then last year, we then tried to connect up the networks with the working groups to come up with projects that then integrated a little better between the two of them. So that there's now 11 projects that are 3-year projects that now take some of the concepts the working groups were working on and place them and integrate with the networks more explicitly. Again, we're very purposeful engaging in people with this meeting. We asked everybody coming from a working group or a network to bring one senior career person and one early career person, so that the early career people can engage and experience the activity. So our third primary objective is the early career researchers, which are the GBatNet students, and these are all the countries that they were drawn from. This was most of them in May, and they've done a number of things. I asked them to prepare this at the time, so this is their perspective on what they've been up to. So they've had lots of professional training. Whenever we meet, there's always an extra day for the early career researchers, for the students, addressing key professional skills. They've been heavily involved in the working groups, often in leadership roles. So they've had opportunities to work integratively and internationally in those. They've taken a key role in our science communication, organizing the My Field for Dummies and webinar series that we have. If you're unfamiliar with that, maybe Susan can put a link in the chat for that. And in many cases, actually giving the talks as well for the webinar, and then presenting and representing GBatNet around the world at various conferences. And what they're working on now are integrative research projects in groups of 3 to 5 or 6 that work across their disciplines. And we've been guiding them through the proposal developments phase, and they're now all just got their reviews back and are modifying them to move forward on actually implementing the projects. So that's a quick and dirty overview, and of course it requires a cast of thousands, and my long-term goal is to have so many people on this acknowledgement slide that it really is absolutely impossible to pick out anybody's name at all. So that's my goal. If you're looking for your name, you'll probably see it if you've been involved in a GBatNet activity. But yes, so that's what I've been working on, and in an effort to continue that and keep getting my names even smaller, everybody, of course, is welcome to find pathways to join us at GBatNet through engagement with the working groups or the new integrative projects.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tigger. That's fantastic. And I know obviously there's been quite a lot of work being done on supporting actually more women in kind of getting involved in bat research and bat science. So just wondering kind of what initiatives within GBatNet that you could maybe highlight that are particularly obviously the capacity strengthening activities are really quite incredible, connecting people, but also just wondering what other initiatives that you think have been quite useful in connecting more women.
I would say that we, a little bit as I said at the opening, that we didn't purposefully set out to recruit women over men, right? But we set out to make the environment and to recruit very attractive to women, to make first off at the recruitment stage. So of course there are some tools out there. If you're a woman and you see an advert with 5 women as the leaders or 4 women as the leaders, that's already signaling that this is a more inclusive and women-friendly environment, for example. So there are some things there at the recruitment stage, and there are things that we asked student applicants that we were very purposeful in, that we know there are questions that turn women off from applying for things. So we were applying a large body of literature to practices that can encourage women to apply and engage with us. So we were doing things like that rather than purposefully going out to get particular women or get female students, right? So it was more about using what's known about what turns women off science and kind of doing the opposite to A, recruit widely, and then B, when we start our activities, again, with making sure we're listening to everybody's voice and having concrete mechanisms that enable people to participate. That's really how we've attracted and retained women. So especially in the US, though, you have to be quite careful, particularly right now, about how you go about including women. And broadening participation is really the starting point, is making sure you make an environment that is comfortable, profitable, for women, like making sure there are clear outputs. We have a number of female leaders of the working groups. And again, it's important they're not just left being secretaries or organizing or chivying everybody to join a group activity. They need to be the lead authors on papers arising, or the first and last author, so they have concrete product, right? So it's things like that, that making sure that so it's more the practice and implementation of these activities that are known to benefit anybody who's been minoritized, but in particular women. I don't know if Liliana, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no. What I'd like to say is, like, I think we are sort of GBatNet has come as a time where we've been able to sort of kind of ride a wave in a sense. And what I mean by that is that there are enough PhD level scientists, and there's enough diversity in the world of bat research and conservation leaders around the world, that we have been able to tap into that in addition to help build it. And that has enabled this inclusivity. In other words, if we were starting to do this, let's say 25 years ago, right, I think that we would have had to come in with a different toolbox in terms of trying to introduce people into a system, as opposed to the happier situation that we've been in GBatNet, where we actually have created this sort of spaces where everyone feels welcome. It's not a matter of, I want to reiterate what Tigga said. We're not working deliberately to say, well, you and you belong. It's actually quite the opposite. It's like, well, over time, we've all been, some of us who've been around groups and doing team science longer, we've all had the experience of getting to some kind of event where people just sort of give a couple of presentations and then they say, well, let's open the floor and see who wants to say something. And what happens is that very quickly this dynamic establishes itself, where a couple of people dominate the conversation and other people don't feel really comfortable stepping up. And I think having those experiences from other spaces took us into GBatNet, into being very deliberate about generating spaces where that wasn't the mechanics, and where the dynamics were conducive to everyone feeling like their time was being well spent. Because we're all tapped out for time. We don't want to just kind of like hang around and realize that we're not being heard and we're not actually kind of using our time the best way.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I must say, kind of I remember at the sort of the event after the IBRC, it was really inclusive. And I think the way actually the whole GBatNet environment came about, actually, like Tigger had said, ensured that people who were a bit quieter, but also who, kind of, it made people who maybe weren't as confident speaking actually really be included and heard, and everybody had a voice, and it was really quite an impressive way. And actually it was a really good way of connecting people and actually making people feel part of the bigger network. network. So just to say, this is the kind of unlocking STEM careers is the theme of the International Women and Girl in Bat Science. So we're going to start off by asking all of our speakers today about their career pathway to give us a bit of an overview. But please feel free to pop some questions in the chat. We're going to be then opening up the panel discussion for any questions, or you'll have an opportunity to raise your hand, but you can pop it in the chat as we go. So yeah, who would like to kick us off on your career pathway?
I get to go first because I'm the oldest by a lot. So actually, this gets to something that we sort of touched on here, which is, I think, part of the reason that we've been very successful in recent years of recruiting and retaining women in bat scientists, because the community as a whole in bat biology has a great culture that has evolved over the years. But when I started, which was 35 years ago, it was a little different. The scientific meetings were dominated by men. Most of the senior authors of papers were men. But in that community, there were some really supportive men who took on female graduate students and postdocs and tried to pave the way for a more inclusive group. So I don't think I'd be here today if it wasn't for the fact that the research community, when I entered it 35 years ago, had some allies in it already who really wanted to see things diversify and really recognize the value of women in science. I came to bat biology kind of late. I didn't work on bats until after I got my PhD. I was trained as a paleontologist in graduate school, and I worked on extinct mammals that had no living relatives. And I got kind of tired of that because I was interested in the evolution of biological traits and behaviors. And bats attracted me because it was just such a diverse group. And I never really expected I'd spend the rest of my career working on bats. It was something that's like, oh, this is a cool group I want to do a little work on. And things sort of went from there. I started in a postdoctoral fellowship to study the evolution of echolocation, looking at morphological traits in the skull. Some of that I finished, some of it I never finished, but things went on from there. And over the years, I've been introduced mostly by colleagues and a lot of my students actually into whole fields of research that I wasn't trained in originally. I mean, we didn't do DNA work when I was in graduate school because it was such a long time ago. Work on microbiomes, work on disease dynamics, work on ecology, community structure, movement patterns. All of the stuff that I've done in recent years in all of these fields is because of people inviting me in and teaching me, sometimes my own students being the one doing the teaching. And so I guess one of the messages I want to send to younger women out there is that you're not necessarily setting your entire career based on the decisions you make right now. I followed the things I was interested in and the people that I liked working with, and it's kept me excited about science for a lot of years. I think I've said enough now. Pass it on to somebody else.
Maybe Susan, if you want to go, and then followed by Liliana, and then Abby, and then take.
Sure. So coincidentally, one of my mentors is here. It's Nancy, and she was my PhD advisor. But I will say that I think part of my career in bats actually, and working in this is actually also coming from a very male-dominated field, because I used to work on birds prior to bats, and that was very much a territorial field. Everybody kind of picks their thing they work on, and then chooses to be in that little corner. And I was very fortunate to have gone to a undergraduate only institution that was very research focused, where all my mentors there were very much about inclusivity and made me aware of these kinds of politics within science pretty early on in my career. So I could keep an eye out for what things I should be looking for in terms of people who would actually invite me to spaces and welcome me, and not just try to, make me a secretary, like Digga said. And so I was allowed to work on research pretty early on in my career. And as a result, that give me a lot of personal confidence in what I am doing as a scientist, and get a lot of support through my college, and then also later on at university. And so I think having these mentors was a really big part of why I stayed in science and also kept working on bats. And that is something that I emphasize to my own students also, is that, if you need me to help you with even something that seems kind of silly sounding, like, you know, I'm too shy to go introduce myself to so-and-so person, I'm happy to do that because I think that that was also very helpful to me when I was a student. I mean, that's true not just for women, but also for other students who are from backgrounds where English might not be their first language, or if they are from the global South and don't feel very comfortable talking to people who they have, you know, hierarchical and societal reasons for why they might feel a little shy talking to them. And I think I tell people, especially because I work in the UN now, I always tell people, well, this is the I'm American power of, I'm just going to go talk to this person now. And so that's totally acceptable where we're from, in a way where it's not as much from some of the places that we work in Asia. And that's something that I will say that at the very least I have benefited from multiple times again, is that everybody I've talked to has been always very welcoming and has invited me again and again back to these spaces. And so I like to pay it forward now in whatever capacity that I can as a person who is now entering into their mid-career. And as a person who's entering in mid-career in 3 months, actually. I think that at the very least that whatever knowledge I've imparted to the younger students, you know, through either my own students that I mentor or through GBatNet with the student reps, have largely been based on the fact that my own experiences have benefited very much from mentorship from people. And I do think that what Nancy says is very true in terms of, you know, having these spaces where people had to welcome us was very necessary, because it is still, you know, even though it is very inclusive in a lot of spaces now, we did ride this wave of like coming in through being more aware of community and being more aware of inclusivity as an issue. It is still something that is very much a barrier to folks depending on where they're coming from. And that can always make it feel like it's very daunting to reach out to people who might be more senior to you. So, I mean, my own personal career is a little strange in that I just basically decided I'm going to go work on bats after I worked on birds, and then I just applied for grad school. And it is difficult for me to tell people sometimes, like, this is just my career and this is how I got there, because I just decided to do it and basically just went out and did it. I finished my PhD at City University of New York, and then I applied for a AAAS Science and Technology and Policy Fellowship, which is a program through the AAAS, and they put people with PhDs from the US into government positions where you can use your expertise to benefit those agencies. And currently, that is probably not exactly the best of options for your future career path to get into policy, given the environment with the US government. But it was a really good opportunity prior to that. And I still think working with state level governments and working with other folks who are in policy is an option for those who are interested in that. And at the same time, I'm still, you know, very much interested in encouraging folks to contribute to science through research facilities like museums and other institutions that house these for the long term. So I think there's other all academic routes that are of interest to people, and I encourage folks to look for opportunities and apply for jobs and apply for contracts and apply for things in those realms, and not just stick with academia, because there are a lot of jobs out there, even though it may be a bit difficult at the current moment. I think in the long term, though, there are still always just more opportunities out there than people think there are. So yeah, I'll just pass it on to next person.
All right. I think my career is actually doesn't really have like a linear pattern. It's if I would characterize it, it would be just sort of happy serendipity or luck, because I like Susan, I actually applied. I wrote this very deliberate applications to graduate school, and one of them was to the Museum of Natural History in New York, and it was predicated on having someone in the department that looks at birds pay attention to me. And that person must have been on holiday or whatever. They never replied to my email. And then I get this email from someone that I didn't know about, because remember, I was focused on birds. And this kind person just writes back and says, well, your CV looks great, but we don't know how to recruit you. So if you would consider a detour for birds to study bats, I can be your mentor. And I thought, then I quickly just kind of researched, like, who is this person? What do they do? And how do I do that? And that person was Nancy. So Nancy, like, just sort of took a chance on some rando that had put in an application to study the birds, but been ignored, right? And that the chance that she gave me enabled me to join the museum and join the graduate program of a nearby university. And in that nearby university, sort of consider working on a different taxonomic group that I was originally oriented for. So by the time I, like a couple of years went by, and I was like, well, this is a rather better environment than I'm used to in the bird world. And there were a lot of sharper elbows at the time, and I hear that hasn't changed very much. And it just seemed like there were so many things that one could study that were still waiting to be done in bats. So there's this huge fascination. So things have obviously, I've advanced in my career from there. And in every step of the way, it's kind of seizing opportunities. Something that I want to highlight, so Susan was talking about the different kinds of opportunities. A very important part of my progression as a scientist or being a scientist has been public funding from the National Science Foundation in the United States. It's been essential. I think there would be very little in terms of achievement and getting to where I am if I had not been able to secure funding for my work as a graduate student, and then funding during my early career, and then funding subsequently in my career. And that's really important. So sources of funding are important, and they're difficult and challenging around the world. They have always been competitive and difficult, even in the United States context, more so now, but they're difficult and challenging around the world. So I think one of the things that at GBatNet we've been able to do is actually help build the skills so that the next generation, wherever they are in the world, they've got a toolkit to be able to go and get the funding that's going to be necessary for them, right? Because we know that these projects are not going to get done and these scientific questions are not going to get answered if we don't have some basis with which to do that. So there's a toolkit part of the career. So I think that's been one of the most rewarding aspects of being part of GBatNet is actually getting to know people from around the world. Their environments are different. Funding is scarce and competitive wherever you are, but actually being able to say, we can help. There are things that one can do to become better at it. So it's very satisfying.
Okay, so I don't have quite as much of a history as some of the middle to, what are we calling it, senior career people on this call. So I'm gonna, I guess, focus a little bit more on how I got to be where I am in terms of like finding and taking advantage of opportunities. So like Susan, I went to not an undergraduate only, but undergraduate and master's, relatively small institution in the US. And my undergraduate degree is in wildlife biology. So it was a little bit less hard science and a little bit more applied management, although bridging the gap between the two. And I had a really good mentor there, one of the faculty members who, like, I was in his lab, I worked for his grad students, eventually I was overseeing other undergraduates. And the thing I took away from that, besides that I love research and I want to do more of it, is this process of people will walk through open doors if you tell them that they're available. And the best people tend to be the ones who will keep going through. So instead of pushing for specific people to keep going through, is you remove the barriers and you open the door and you say, would you consider, instead of being one of the GIS gremlins in the lab, watching over the GIS gremlins in the lab and make sure they're doing it right? And then asking for what you want is extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding. So saying things like, I would like to try and do some independent research, please. And my undergraduate mentor was like, okay. And so that's kind of how I got into research as an undergrad. How I got into bat research was a little bit more winding, as everyone has said. I tend to work with small squeaky things. At first it was small mammals, so kangaroo rats. But I always loved bats because I grew up on the East Coast of the US, where we have bats in the skies at night, and that was just something that I found very interesting and fascinating as a kid. And so I kept trying to get into bat work, which can be challenging. Eventually I found someone, I emailed them, I said, would you take me as a volunteer? And he said yes. And I volunteered with him for a couple of years. And then I said, I'm going to apply for this undergraduate research experience in Malaysia. And he goes, oh, is Tigga Kingston in charge of that? And the answer was yes. And he goes, she's great. She makes all of the BAT meetings far more colorful and diverse with all of her students. And my brain went, aha, I would like to talk to this person some more. So eventually I did get hired on that job. It felt like a real long shot. I got hired to do soil work, which I'd never done before, but I was like, Malaysia, BAT adjacent, interesting potential PI running around out there. I'm definitely going to take this job. And while we were in Malaysia, I had the opportunity to sometimes talk to Tigga and get an idea of her mentorship and her leadership, and wound up in her lab a year or so later. And then from there, again, it was a lot of people opening doors for me and saying, are you interested in walking through? So the first time I got involved in GBatNet was way back, I think, spring 2020. So mid-COVID, everything was absolute chaos. And Tigga sends me an email and says, would you like to take notes for this town hall meeting we're having to just listen to everyone and their concerns and start to get an idea of what's going on, not just in the US, but around the world? And I said yes, because that was a door I wanted to walk through. I wanted to do more international research. I wanted to do more team research, and it just snowballed from there. And so I think the message to the younger people, earlier career students, is go through the open doors if you're interested in them. And the message to the people who are maybe later in their careers or have that opportunity is to tell people explicitly, here is an opportunity for you to do this thing. Would you like to take it? And then try and remove the barriers that might stop people from doing those things. Tig, I think you're up.
Wow, I don't know what to say after that. It's hard to be so eloquent. Nice job, Abby. That was really great. Okay, I'll start with the serendipity part, which is a common theme. I've always been obsessed with mammals and mammal conservation. As an undergraduate from the UK, we have this tradition of organising our own undergraduate expeditions, and I managed to get on one going to Colombia, where I was meant to work on small squeaky things that didn't fly on the small mammals. All the mammal traps got stuck in Colombian customs, never to be seen again. And the bird group, we have bird people who let us use their mist nets, and that's how, and so we started working on bats. And then I was like, oh, I'm not going back to rats. They're nasty, smelly things. And so after that, it was bats all the way. Really fascinated by the diversity of bats. And well, we won't start why bats are cool because we'll all be here forever. I think I just want to echo a couple of themes that people have mentioned, particularly Abby's, walking through open doors. Sometimes I can imagine some of you saying, well, where is this open door, right? Because the open doors may be few and far between, and so sometimes you've got to try and make your own open door to some extent. Like, it's annoying to put that burden back on people, but you have to sometimes seize opportunities that aren't as obvious or aren't as advertised. Right. So when I joined the first expedition to Colombia, I didn't organize it. I wrote to everybody organizing expeditions that year across the whole UK and said, I'll pay my way. Can I come on your expedition? And one of them responded and said yes. When I wanted to do a PhD in the US, because it had been suggested, I got the original the original bat behavioral methods book, which was an old blue book, and I wrote to all the chapter authors and said I want to do a PhD on bats, and two or three of them said yes. One said you have to speak French, so that was out for me, I'm afraid, because I wasn't very good at French. And then two of the ones that responded positively, I went with Tom Kuntz, who you may be aware of. So sometimes if there isn't an open door, don't be afraid to try and make doors for yourselves. So that would kind of be the only add-on to Abby's, is because worst case it doesn't open or there is no door, but you haven't lost anything by asking and writing and pushing. And that does take us back to a little bit to the earlier side of the earlier evolution of this community, but those challenges are still there. Worst case scenario, you lose the time it took to send these things out, but you might gain something. Then I think more as your career moves more on, I think I want to also emphasize for women the importance of networks. particularly ones that have women and ally men, right? So when I started at Texas Tech, it's a faculty of 40 and there were 4 women on the faculty. Right? And this will be a common experience in work environments for many female scientists. And that was, they were all, well, they weren't all okay, the men. The vast majority of the environment was fine. A couple of ones on the extreme end, but generally an okay and supportive environment. But where I got my real support was through my female professional network at the North American Society for Bat Research, which included, among others, Nancy. And I would meet with them every year, and they were incredibly supportive to me as I've moved through my career. And whatever support I wasn't getting as a woman in science at my own institute, I was getting externally. And so I can't understate how important that is through your careers, is to maintain and nourish your networks, and as your career develops, and support other women, of course, and I've tried to do the same. It becomes it's very important, not just for the advice and the kind of emotio professional support, but also then when you start looking for the next stages and you need letter writers, you need references, you then have some people that you can draw on. So I think that's also very important, and not to discount the allyship that is offered by men who are who are allies, who are open and very inclusive themselves. So those are I think those are my key points. I want to leave us time for questions for everybody.
Can I build on that just a little bit for a second here? So the networking is crucial. Finding good mentors is really, really crucial too, especially when you're a student, a postdoc, earlier in your career. And one of the ways to find good mentors is to use a network and listen to what people say. There are some people out there you don't want to work with, and usually you'll hear through the grapevine who those people are, people to be avoided. They may be good scientists, but they're not good mentors or good allies. The flip side is, if you go to meetings and you talk to lots of people, you also hear and learn about who the people are that can be relied on. Sometimes they're very, young researchers, early career, just a couple stages above you, but you can find mentors in many different places if you talk to other people about it. So I think one of the most problematic things you can do as a student is just to apply to one program blindly without talking to people, without visiting and talking to the other students. How do they feel about this professor that you're thinking of working with, or this boss you're thinking of working for? The way to avoid falling into traps that will basically make your life miserable and possibly drive you out of science, versus finding a community of support with strong mentorship and strong allies, is to talk to people. So you have to ask those hard questions. Are you happy with your advisor? Are you happy in your job? And so on. At any point in your career stage, I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice, and certainly the networking. I mean, and one thing that's also really kind of clear from all of you reading your bios is obviously you're involved in a number of different really fantastic initiatives, global initiatives as well, and regional initiatives. But just to say, if anybody wants to raise their hand if they have a question, or pop it into the chat, because we've just got a couple more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes or so. But we have had a couple of people asking about how they get involved, and actually the different working groups. Just to say, Susan has popped in the chat some resources in there, but I don't know, Susan, if you want to, or anybody would like to kind of give a bit of a plug on how people could get involved with this network of networks.
Yes, so like I mentioned in the chat, the different working group leaders are to reach out to folks as they are active, and when you submit the form, you get added to the members list, and then the leaders have to actually reach out to everybody. And some people have not been active this past summer, so if you recently did apply, we were supposed to have folks who are updating those in order to actually get people connected to the groups that they're meaning to be involved with. So if you do want to reach out to them and you haven't heard back from them, then you can email us at our GBatNet email, and then we can connect you directly to those leaders. Also, those leaders are sometimes changing, and so there is some flux sometimes, and so it can take a little bit at times, and also just based on level of activities, based on how busy everybody is recently. I will also say that there are some groups that just may be more active than others. So if you do actually feel like there is a group where it doesn't seem like there's a lot of progress and you would like to be a lead on one of them, those actually I would be very much interested in hearing from folks, just because we need more folks in leadership positions in certain areas like related to climate change, and that, for instance, is not an active group right now. So if you reach out about that, which I have had several people reach out to me and then have had no activity come from that, I'm very interested in hearing from you also. So feel free to send us an email if you are keen on those topics.
I just put our GBatNet Gmail account email in the chat. So if you're not getting contacts the way you want them to, you can email this email address, and hopefully one of us can put you in touch with the right person or group.
And I'm loving how Nancy kind of stole a potential birder, which we actually hear this theme quite a lot. So I must admit, in Africa, where we're struggling for bat people, and certainly I'm now based in Scotland, and there's a lot of people in Europe that started off doing bird work and have moved across. So I guess, Nancy, it would be quite nice to kind of know, I mean, obviously you came across Liliana's application and must have seen quite a lot. So I guess advice on if people are reaching out, particularly certainly I know in Southern Africa, people might want to go and do a placement somewhere else, and it's actually quite nice, and it's quite brave to go and work in another country, never mind another continent. But just advice on kind of what you'd be looking out for if people are applying, any tips or tricks on how to stand out, I suppose, from the crowd.
Several of us should probably address that because we probably all have different opinions. I think that when people have contacted me over the years, it's overlap in interests. Like, what are the questions you're interested in addressing? So in the case, Liliana is a perfect case. She had a great application with the kinds of questions I was interested in addressing. Now, the focal organisms were birds, but it was very easy to look at what she wanted to do and go, oh, this is the kind of stuff I do. And it's the kind of scientific questions I'm interested in addressing. And also I have the tools to help, like shepherd her through the academic process. Although in Liliana's case, mostly I just had to sign on the dotted line because she was very self-driven. But it's hard if it doesn't make any sense to apply to work in someone's lab who does something completely different from what you want to do. Those are the ones that we just go, I'm not the right mentor for that, because the mentors want to have a good match with the students. We want to feel like there's something we can actually bring to the table to help that student in that student's career. So if somebody comes to me and wants to work on something I know nothing about, I'm not going to be interested in taking them on as a student. If they want to work on something that's the kind of thing I do, that's a different matter.
Yeah,
Can I jump in and add something?
Sorry, Abby, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for potential students out there as well, it's not just research interests that need to align, but mentorship styles. So take a little time to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. So do you need somebody very hands-on? Do you prefer people to just leave you alone? Something in the middle? And talk about that with a potential mentor before you take on a PhD or a postdoc, so that you know that not just your interests, but your ability to interact are compatible.
Yeah, just to kind of add a little bit of a practical or practical advice about navigating how to find a scientific match with mentors. I think it's very important for prospective trainees to kind of think about reading very carefully what that person has been doing, especially in the last 5 years or so. And if this is somebody that has, like Tiga, like a prodigious amount of publications coming out and you can't quite make out what they're leading on, look for the ones where they're the last author or the first author, right? So look for the ones that they're really leading. There may be a lot of collaborations where they're not really leading that. Look for what they're leading, and kind of that gives you, don't get stuck on things that they did 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because they may have the skill set, but they may have moved on from those particular publications or that particular area. So look for 5 to 7 years of what are they leading, what are they pushing forward. And then another sort of practical dimension of that is to also look at that projects page, the page that has like funding or, you know, kind of like support of some kind, because that projects page tells you what are the things that they're active with, where there are some resources that will help you if you come in as a postdoc, if you come in as a graduate student, you will have some resources that way. If you're like aligning with some of the science, but you're like, basically the projects have already moved on, then that's going to be harder, right? So look for, you know, I'm trying to be practical and having some inside baseball on how to read a website, how to read like a Google Scholar to figure out what's worthwhile for you to pursue and to consider about research questions. These are things that I myself didn't know when I was applying, and I find that I get emails from people and they're sending me their CV and they're very eager, but they don't seem to be aware that you need to align those questions in a way that your mentor is going to be capable of mentoring you.
And like Gabby said before, you know, in terms of reaching out to people, there are a lot of mentors that have students already, and you should definitely reach out to them and email them. You know, their emails are online for a reason. When we have students who visit us on campus when we were back in CUNY also, we would also give time for prospective students to talk to them, because it's better to figure out if your styles match with the mentor by talking to the students themselves, not necessarily the mentors, because I think the mentors don't always know that what they say they do is not exactly what the students perceive that they actually do. So you do need to actually talk to the students, not to the mentor sometimes, to get that. I think that it's just more comfortable sometimes talking to your peers, and so sometimes you might feel more inclined to actually ask questions that you may not feel comfortable asking the mentor. So reach out to those folks. And sometimes the PIs will also themselves even say like, oh, here's all my students, feel free to talk to them. And that's always a good sign, because that means they feel pretty confident that they're a pretty good mentor if they let you just, you know, go and talk to them. So yeah, just reach out to people. Everybody is generally pretty nice. And then, you know, if nobody answers, it's not like there's anything much lost from that. So it's okay to just reach out to folks.
Professional meetings are a great way to do that. If there's ever meetings that overlap with your interests, be it conservation biology or a BAT meeting or other kinds of meetings where you can meet other students and potential mentors, meeting people face to face makes a huge difference compared to just an email contact. So if you can possibly manage to get to any professional meetings that that overlap with your interests, that's a great way to meet people and network. And you know, and if you're shopping for a program of some sort, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. And I know, so Wangani, who's a master student in Malawi and one of the Bats Without Borders staff members, I remember he got in touch to say, oh, we've got 2 new students in Malawi, Salome, who is here today, and another person. So they only had 3 students in the whole of Malawi who were working on bats, but it had gone from 1 to kind of 3 and feeling a lot more comfortable. But this kind of network space. So again, just a plug, as Tigger had said, you know, there's a really active Facebook page. There's lots of information on the website. So do connect, and it's a great place to ask these kind of questions. And, you know, sometimes people can't necessarily afford to go and study abroad, but you can still, you know, collaborate with an international researcher as well. That's why I always recommend any students from Southern Africa as well. If they, you know, you could either have a lab or even look at opportunities for research to get somebody to come out to help with your research. But I just wanted to, there's been lots of great tips and tricks from Tigger and others in the chat as well. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you very, very much for coming along today. And I'm sure everybody will agree, an incredibly inspiring set of fantastic women doing a heck of a lot for bats and bat conservation internationally. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for this chance to talk to everybody. It's really, really great. And good luck. Good luck out there.
Thanks to everybody for coming.
Thanks for everybody for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for this chance to talk to everybody. It's really, really great. And good luck. Good luck out there.
Thanks to
Yeah.
everybody for coming.
Thanks for everybody for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.